Before your conscious mind even registers who it is, your body reacts. A sudden heaviness grips your chest, a jolt of electricity races up your spine, and a knot forms in your stomach. A chaotic blend of thrill and dread. It is the sheer shock of the unforeseen. The resurrection of a voice you had convinced yourself was gone for good. The sudden reappearance of someone who once occupied a massive part of your life, only to vanish without ever giving you a proper ending. In that split second, every fiber of your being screams to engage. You feel a magnetic compulsion to open the message immediately, to obsess over every syllable, and to flood the void that has finally been broken. Your emotions sprint ahead while your logic struggles to find its footing. But this precise moment, right at the very start, is the turning point. Because here is where most people fail. They simply react. They allow that tidal wave of adrenaline to dictate their actions. They fire back a reply instantly, driven by instinct rather than intention, desperate to quiet the anxiety born from the silence. They chase the immediate relief of clarity, seeking the comfort of validation. They are starving for answers. But reacting is the easiest thing in the world. It costs nothing. It requires no clarity, no boundaries, no self-respect. Responding, however, that's different. Responding comes from stillness. Responding requires you to pause long enough to step out of the emotional storm and into perspective. Just because someone suddenly comes back doesn't mean you owe them instant access to you again. It doesn't mean you owe them warmth, softness, enthusiasm, or even conversation. You're allowed to take a breath. You're allowed to assess what's happening without rushing to say something. You're allowed to observe rather than absorb. You're allowed to think about what's good for you instead of preparing yourself to comfort someone who once chose to be absent. That pause is not passive. It is powerful. It's the moment where you reclaim your center. Because the truth is, silence is not neutral. Silence is communication. Silence tells a story all on its own. When someone disappears, their silence speaks louder than any words they could have said. It tells you what place you held in their life. It tells you how quickly they were willing to let go. It tells you how little they considered the confusion you were left sitting in. And if you don't take a moment to remember the truth that silence revealed, you risk giving your heart away again without wisdom. That's why the pause matters so much. It's not about manipulation or withholding or trying to punish someone. It's about alignment. It's about asking yourself a question that many people never stop to ask. What do I want? Not what does he feel? Not what does this message mean? Not what would make him comfortable. But what do I want for myself? For my peace? For my emotional safety? For my future? Because when someone reappears after silence, it's easy to lose yourself in the story you once built about them. It's easy to slip into memory rather than reality. Your mind quickly selects the highlights, the laughs, the connection, the chemistry, the versions of him that made you feel seen. It conveniently skips past the confusion, the unanswered questions, the nights you waited for closure that never came. Nostalgia is a dangerous filter. It makes us romanticize what we once hoped could be, instead of remembering what actually was. That's why pausing isn't just emotional restraint. It's emotional protection. In the pause, you step outside the fantasy and back into the truth. You remember how it felt when your messages were left hanging. You remember the exhaustion of chasing clarity from someone who gave you none. You remember how it felt to be unsure, to second-guess yourself, to wonder what you did wrong when the truth was never about you. It was about what they chose not to give. So when your phone lights up and you see his name, instead of leaping into his world, step back into your own. Ask yourself, quietly and honestly, what has changed? Has he come back with clarity, with accountability, with intention? Or has he simply come back because the silence became uncomfortable for him? Because boredom set in? Because his ego was hungry? Because he wanted to know he still had access to you? Because validation is easy when someone has always been available. The first message someone sends after silence is rarely about love. It's rarely about growth. It's rarely about a genuine desire to repair what was broken. More often, it's a ping, a test, a check-in to see if the door is still open, a casual reach for emotional convenience, a moment of curiosity wrapped in a sentence like, "Hey, been thinking about you," or "How have you been?" or "Hey, stranger." Those words sound sweet when you miss someone. They feel like hope when you've been waiting. But nostalgia is not accountability. A memory is not a promise. A message is not change. Anyone can say they've been thinking about you. The real question is, what are they willing to do about it? Now, thinking about someone doesn't heal the hurt they caused. Thinking about someone doesn't restore what silence broke. Thinking about someone is an effort. It's impulse. An impulse is not foundation. If someone truly wants to return to your life in a meaningful way, they don't show up with laziness. They don't show up with a breadcrumb text expecting you to fill in the blanks. They show up with intention. They show up with clarity. They show up with accountability. They name what happened. They acknowledge the silence. They take responsibility. They communicate their desire clearly and respectfully. They don't assume access. They ask for it. And until you see that, your silence is not cruelty. Your silence is intelligence. It's protection. It's you saying, "I am not an emotional convenience. I am not here to be taken off the shelf when your loneliness peaks. I am not the place you return to when the world gets quiet. If you want a place in my life, you have to knock like someone who understands the value of the room they're trying to enter." That's why the pause matters. It separates the ones who want attention from the ones who want connection. It exposes motives. It reveals character. It filters impulse from intention. When you pause, someone who is never serious will disappear again, and someone who is serious will rise with clarity. That's not punishment. That's truth. The pause is where you reclaim the power you once handed away too easily. Because the moment you stop rushing to respond, something shifts. You stop asking, "What should I say so he doesn't lose interest?" And you begin asking, "Is this someone who deserves a place in my life?" And that change in perspective is everything. It transforms you from someone waiting to be chosen into someone who chooses. It shifts the dynamic from reaction to evaluation, from emotional impulse to emotional intelligence. And here's what most people never realize. The longer you wait to respond, the clearer things become. Not just for you, but for the person who reached out. That time reveals intention. When someone reaches out and you don't reply right away, their next move tells you everything. Do they follow up with honesty and effort? Or do they disappear again the moment they don't receive instant gratification? Because if a single pause causes them to vanish, they were never planning to stay. They were seeking access, not connection. They wanted ego relief, not responsibility. Someone who cares won't be scared off by space. Someone who values you won't interpret your silence as rejection. They'll interpret it as a sign that if they want you, they must show up differently. But someone who only came back for attention will retreat the moment they don't receive immediate validation. And that saves you time. It saves you future confusion. It saves you from reopening a door that leads right back into the same cycle that once broke you. That's why matching energy matters. When someone returns with a vague, effortless message, you don't respond with enthusiasm or emotional investment. You meet them where they are, neutral, grounded, measured. The moment you reply with paragraphs to someone who offered you crumbs, you communicate that they don't need to try. You tell them that bare minimum effort is enough to regain access to you. You signal that your heart is available, even without accountability. And people will always take the path of least resistance when you show them they can. So instead of emotionally flooding the moment they say something like, "Hey, been thinking about you," Imagine responding with calm clarity. Something simple, something self-respecting. Something like, "Hope you're well. What made you reach out?" No emotion, no memories, no assumptions, just a question. Because if someone wants to come back, they should be able to explain why. They should know what they want. They should arrive prepared to repair, not just revisit. And when you ask that question, listen to the answer. Not the tone, not the nostalgia, not the emotion behind the words, but the structure. Does he speak with clarity or confusion? Does he take responsibility for disappearing? Or does he skip over the silence like it never happened? Does he come with intentional movement forward? Or does he come with vague sentiment and nothing else? Does he acknowledge that something broke? Or does he pretend everything is just fine? You're not looking for poetic apologies or dramatic confessions. You're looking for evidence of emotional maturity. You're looking for effort. You're looking for change. You're looking for someone who understands that silence has consequences and that trust has to be rebuilt, not assumed. Because the truth is simple, but uncomfortable. If nothing has changed, then nothing will change. If he left without clarity and returns without clarity, the ending will be the same. If he disappeared when things became difficult and returns only when things feel convenient, the cycle will repeat. If he reappears without growth, the relationship will collapse again, and you know it. Deep down, you've always known. You felt the pain of uncertainty the first time around, and your body remembers it. Your stomach remembers what it felt like to wait for answers that never came. Your mind remembers trying to convince yourself that maybe he was busy, or overwhelmed, or going through something, when in reality, he was simply choosing silence. Your heart remembers the sting of realizing you were holding on to the fantasy of what could be instead of the truth of what was. That pain was not meaningless. It was instruction. It taught you something essential. Your peace is too expensive to hand to the wrong person. Your time is too valuable to waste on someone who treats you like an option. Your heart is too precious to be handled recklessly. So when he comes back, instead of focusing on how much you missed him, focus on what his silence taught you. Focus on what you learned about yourself during the time he was gone. Focus on how much strength it took to heal from the confusion. Focus on the boundaries you built to protect the version of you that rose from the hurt. Ask yourself quietly, if I open this door again, what am I inviting back into my life? Am I stepping into healing or into history? Am I choosing clarity or choosing chaos? Am I being guided by wisdom or by longing? Longing is loud. Longing screams, maybe this time will be different. But wisdom whispers, what's different this time? Longing is emotional impulse. Wisdom is emotional maturity. Longing sees potential. Wisdom sees pattern. And patterns always reveal truth. That's why people say, if someone wants to be with you, you'll know. And if they don't, you'll be confused. Confusion is an answer. Mixed signals are an answer. Inconsistency is an answer. Silence is an answer. You never need to force clarity when someone is truly meant for you. The right person won't disappear without explanation. The right person won't come back without intention. The right person won't be threatened by your boundaries. They'll respect them. They won't resent your standards. They'll rise to meet them. And if they don't, your silence becomes your answer. Silence is not empty. Silence speaks. Silence communicates a level of self-worth that words could never express. Silence says, I no longer chase people who walk away. I no longer apologize for expecting consistency. I no longer romanticize someone's potential while ignoring their pattern. I no longer give repeated chances to someone who proved they don't value the first one. Your silence is the moment you choose you. And the moment you choose yourself, everything changes. The moment you choose yourself is the moment you stop hoping someone else will do it for you. It's the moment you stop waiting to be prioritized by someone who didn't choose you the first time. It's the moment you realize that the peace you built during their absence is too valuable to gamble on the possibility that they have changed. And when you reach that level of self-awareness, everything inside you shifts. You stop craving the validation of someone returning, and you start valuing the stability of someone staying. Because the truth is, anyone can come back. It's easy to reappear. It requires no courage to send a message. It takes no sacrifice to say, "Hey, I've been thinking about you." Few taps on a screen, and suddenly they are inside your world again. But effort is not measured by the ease of a message. Effort is measured by consistency, by clarity, by action that aligns with words. People want credit for remembering you. But remembering someone is not the same as showing up for them. Think about all the people you remember from your past, old friends you lost touch with, people you once cared about deeply, memories that come and go. You remember them, but that doesn't mean you want to rebuild a life with them. Thought is effortless. Presence is intentional. And the difference between the two is everything. So when someone reaches out after silence, instead of letting your heart race ahead, step into observation mode. Watch what happens next. Because what they do after the first message is far more revealing than the message itself. Do they try to understand how their silence affected you? Do they acknowledge the gap they created? Do they take responsibility for leaving you without clarity? Do they ask what you need now? Do they show consistency over time? Or do they disappear again when the conversation requires depth? Do they make an effort to rebuild trust? Or do they act like the past never happened? People reveal themselves quickly when you stop filling in the space for them. When you don't rush to explain, don't rush to ask questions. Don't rush to make things easy. You give them the room to show their true intentions. And intentions always surface when you stop carrying the emotional weight that isn't yours to hold. One of the most profound shifts you can make is realizing that someone coming back is not automatically a compliment. It's not proof of your worth. Your worth was never missing. It was never dependent on whether they stayed or left. Your value is not determined by who chooses you, but by who you choose to allow access to you. Letting someone back into your life should not be a default reaction. It should be a conscious decision. You are not a second chance waiting to be taken. You are not a comfort zone someone gets to revisit when life stops distracting them. You are not a placeholder or a backup plan or a safety net someone falls into when loneliness hits. You are a whole person with a whole life that kept moving even when they went silent. And the fact that you survived their absence. The fact that you found strength in the space they left behind. That alone tells you you don't need them to complete you. That's why silence is sacred. It shows you who you are without them. It gives you the clarity you never had when you were emotionally entangled. Attachment is driven by fear. Fear of loss, fear of loneliness, fear of missing out, fear of never finding someone else. Alignment is driven by clarity. Clarity about what you deserve, what you need, and what you will no longer accept. People often confuse longing for proof of compatibility. They assume, if I miss him, if I still feel something, it must mean we're meant to be. But missing someone doesn't mean you're supposed to be with them. It simply means you're human. It means you care deeply. It means you felt something real. It means you gave your heart honestly. It means you were willing. And there is no shame in being willing. But willingness isn't enough if the other person lacks capacity. Connection is not built by one heart doing the work for two. It's created when both people show up. It's sustained by consistency, nurtured through honesty, strengthened through effort, and protected through communication. Anything less than that is not a relationship. It's emotional convenience. So when he comes back, ask yourself without judgment, do I miss him, or do I miss the version of us that I wished could exist? Do I miss him? Or do I miss who I was when I believed he was good for me? Do I miss him? Or do I miss the dream I created in my mind? Because sometimes the pain of letting go isn't about losing the person. It's about letting go of the story you were writing while they were disappearing. It takes courage to look at the truth instead of the fantasy. It takes strength to admit that someone you cared about may never give you what you hoped for. It takes self-worth to say, I loved you, but I love myself more. And when you reach that moment, silence becomes less about withholding and more about honoring. Honoring your growth, honoring your healing, honoring your future. When you don't respond, it's not cruelty, it's clarity. It's not punishment, it's a boundary. It's not rejection, it's protection. It's you recognizing that access to you is earned, not assumed. It's you acknowledging that someone's reappearance is not a ticket back into your life. It's you understanding that anyone can want you again, but not everyone deserves you again. Because what you accept determines what you experience next. If you open the door lightly, with no standards, you invite old pain wrapped in new hope. If you open the door slowly, with discernment, you see clearly who belongs there. And if you choose not to open the door at all, sometimes that is the most loving decision you can make for yourself. The pause is where you decide, not based on emotion, not based on history, not based on loneliness, based on truth. Truth becomes the compass when emotions try to pull you backward. And when someone returns after disappearing, the truth isn't found in the message they send. It's found in the space you create before responding. Because in that space, everything settles. The fog clears, the noise quiets. And instead of acting from the part of you that once longed for them, you act from the part of you that survived without them. And here's something most people don't talk about. When you wait to respond, you begin to see the situation without the haze of emotional history. You begin to recognize patterns, not possibilities. You see the reality of who they were, not the imaginary version you held on to. You see the imbalance that once exhausted you. You see how much peace replaced the confusion they created. You see that your life didn't fall apart when they left. In fact, parts of it began to fall into place. There's a version of you that was born in the silence. A version that learned how to stop chasing answers from someone who wasn't brave enough to give them. A version that realized attention is not affection, and presence is not commitment. A version that became stronger, wiser, more grounded. That's the version of you that deserves to decide what happens next. Not the version of you who once waited with hope for a message that never came. Because when someone comes back after being gone, their return is not an automatic victory. It's a test of who you've become, a test of what you've learned, a test of whether you will repeat the same chapter or finally close it. The universe will always bring back what hurt you, not to punish you, but to see if you're still willing to settle for the same pain. That moment when you see their name appear again. It's a crossroads. One path leads backward into history, patterns, assumptions, and emotional self-betrayal. The other leads forward into growth, peace, boundaries, and self-respect. And the decision you make in that moment says more about you than it does about them. Not because you're heartless if you choose silence, and not because you're weak if you choose to reply, but because the choice reveals what matters more to you: familiarity or alignment. Familiarity feels safe. It feels warm, comfortable, nostalgic. It whispers that going back might be easier than starting over. It tells you that the past is better than the unknown. It tries to convince you that maybe the person who hurt you is also the person meant to love you. But alignment asks harder questions. Alignment asks, does this person add peace or confusion to my life? Do they make me feel secure, or do they make me question myself? Do they lift me, or do they drain me? Do they return with intention, or do they return with convenience? You deserve someone who arrives with clarity, not chaos. Someone who meets you with stability, not sporadic emotion. Someone who honors your heart, not someone who treats it like a revolving door. Someone whose actions match their words, not someone who feeds you sweetness and disappears when things get real. Someone who doesn't need to lose you to understand your value. And that's why silence is powerful. Silence forces truth to surface. When you don't rush to respond, you force someone to reveal what they truly want. If they disappear again, you have your answer. If they wait patiently and continue reaching out with consistency, accountability, and sincerity, you have your answer. Either way, you win. Either way, you get clarity. Either way, you protect your peace. But when you respond instantly, when you rush to comfort, you rob yourself of truth. You skip the process that would reveal who they are. You interfere with your own clarity. The premature response becomes a barrier between you and the reality you need to see, because the people who only come back for ego or attention don't have the endurance to stay when silence meets them. They need instant validation to feel powerful. They need access without effort. They need emotional reward without emotional responsibility. That's why matching energy is so important. Not to play games, but to reveal truth. If someone comes in at 2%, you don't show up at 100. You meet them at 2 and wait. If they rise, they're serious. If they fall, they were never worth the climb. You stop trying to prove yourself. You stop trying to convince someone to stay. You stop assuming responsibility for someone else's emotional capacity. And when someone returns after silence, the most powerful mindset you can hold is simple. I am not here to audition for love. I am here to evaluate whether this person adds value to my life now. Not before, not in memory. Now. Ask yourself with honesty, does this person know how to handle my heart? Do they understand the weight of trust? Are they capable of consistency? Are they emotionally available? Are they showing effort or just sending words? Are they truly coming back or just checking if they still can? Because there is a huge difference between someone who misses you and someone who values you. Missing you is a feeling. Valuing you is a decision. People miss what they lost. People value what they fear losing again. When someone returns without accountability, what they're truly saying is, I expect you to still be the same person who made it easy for me. But when you pause, when you hold your ground, when you don't rush, they realize she's not the same woman anymore. I have to step up or step aside. And that is the moment power shifts. Not because you controlled the situation, but because you controlled yourself. Self-control is the highest form of strength, and emotional discipline is the highest form of self-love. So if his message sits there unanswered for hours, or days, or maybe forever, let it. You are not being cold. You are not being cruel. You are honoring the quiet voice inside you that learned something important in his absence. You are saying, my heart is valuable. Access to me is earned. Consistency is required. Effort is non-negotiable. I am not available for half love or half presence. If you want to be here, show me. Not through words, through action, through clarity, through accountability, through consistency. Because someone who truly wants to be in your life will not be intimidated by your standards. They will be inspired by them. Someone who truly wants to return will not run from responsibility. They will not pretend that silence caused no damage. They will not act as if disappearing was normal or acceptable. They will acknowledge what happened. They will speak to the gap. They will show you they understand the weight of the distance they created. They will come with humility, not entitlement. With intention, not convenience. With clarity, not confusion. That's how you separate a real comeback from a casual check-in. A real comeback sounds like, I'm sorry for how I left. You didn't deserve that. I stepped away because I wasn't ready, and I should have communicated instead of disappearing. I want to rebuild this with patience and honesty, and I understand if you need time. Accountability, ownership, clarity. That is emotional maturity. A check-in sounds like, "Hey stranger, what's up? Been thinking about you. How have you been?" No depth, no responsibility, no plan, no change. Just convenience disguised as connection. Just ego disguised as effort. Just nostalgia disguised as intention. And this is where your strength speaks. Not in how you react to the message, but in how you interpret it. Not through urgency, but through discernment. Not through romantic imagination, but through grounded self-worth. Anyone can come back, but not everyone deserves a place in the life you rebuilt without them. Because the truth is, sometimes someone returning doesn't mean they want a relationship. Sometimes they want access. They want reassurance. They want comfort. They want attention. They want to quiet the voice in their head asking if they still matter. They want to feel desired, pursued, wanted. They want to know they can still reach you even after they walked away, without hesitation. But none of those reasons are about love. None of those reasons are about commitment. None of those reasons are about partnership. Those reasons are about ego, and you cannot build a future with someone whose only motivation is emotional hunger. Someone who sees you as a temporary remedy for their loneliness will abandon you again the moment they feel full. Someone who only remembers you when life gets quiet will forget you again the moment life gets loud. That's why silence from you is not a punishment. It is a filter. It reveals motives. It reveals strength. It reveals truth. It reveals whether someone is showing up for you or for themselves. And if they fall away again because you didn't respond instantly, what you lost was not love. What you lost was a cycle that was waiting to repeat itself. What you lost was instability disguised as potential. What you lost was a distraction, not a destiny. So stand still. Stay calm. Sit with your power. Let time do what emotion can't. Because the right person will not fear your standards. The wrong person will run from them. The right person will move toward clarity. The wrong person will retreat into silence. The right person will step forward with effort. The wrong person will fade the moment they don't receive instant gratification. That's the gift of silence. It forces truth to surface, and truth is what sets you free. Free from the fantasy that they were always capable of loving you the way you deserved. Free from the illusion that your value was tied to their presence. Free from the emotional chaos of trying to rewrite someone who was never ready to be a partner. Free from the exhaustion of hoping someone would become who they kept promising they might be. You don't rise when someone comes back. You rise when you don't collapse under the weight of their return. You rise when you hold on to your standards long enough to watch someone reveal their character. You rise when you let silence speak louder than desperation. You rise when you stop choosing potential and start choosing reality. Because your response is not really about him. It's about you. It's about the message you send to yourself. When you respond from fear, you reinforce the belief that you need someone to choose you in order to feel worthy. When you respond from longing, you reinforce the belief that love is something you chase. When you respond from insecurity, you reinforce the belief that you are replaceable. But when you respond from strength, even if the response is silence, you reinforce the truth that you are whole, that you are enough, that you are valuable, that you are not waiting to be rescued, that you are not desperate for someone who already showed you who they are, that you will no longer abandon yourself just to keep someone else. Because the greatest love story you will ever live is the one you build with yourself. So if he comes back, let him speak, let him explain, let him show, let him prove, let him demonstrate change through time and consistency. Let him rise to the level of the woman you have become. And if he doesn't, let him go. Not with bitterness, not with anger, not with resentment, with grace, with maturity, with peace. Walk away without slamming the door, but without leaving it open. Wish him well without wishing him back. Release him without regret. Thank the past version of yourself who loved him, because she was doing the best she could with what she knew. Pay homage to the woman you have become. A woman who is stronger precisely because she has learned to identify what love isn't. Let your absence speak the truths that words never could. Entry refused. Boundaries solid. Serenity guarded. Heart secure. Your value remains absolute. Eventually, someone will walk into your story who requires no testing. A person who isn't rattled by silence. One who speaks with clarity. One who never fades away. A person who has no need to return simply because they never left in the first place. Not someone who sends casual signals, but someone who builds a real presence. Not someone demanding entry, but someone who proves they belong there. Someone who loves you on purpose, with devotion, and with unwavering steadiness. When that person appears, you will comprehend exactly why this silence was essential. You will see clearly that the one who circled back was never the one you were truly waiting for. He was the curriculum, not the destination. The future you are worthy of is far too grand, too luminous, and too divine to be wasted on someone who couldn't hold their ground. So when he breaks the silence to reach out, do not forget. You do not ascend by hitting reply. You ascend by choosing you.